Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Wade, and my guest today, returning for I think her fourth time on the show, is Leigh Stein. Leigh, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, it's good to be back. I'm the author of the novel Self-Care, and I have a new book out called If You're Seeing This, It's Meant for You.
So congratulations on the book, and it just came out this week. It seems to be doing well as far as we can tell. What is this book about?
So this book is about a 39-year-old aging millennial who has kind of aged out of working in the media industry. She keeps getting laid off. She can't find a new job. And a man she hasn't spoken to in 20 years offers her this opportunity to move into his TikTok hype house and manage it, which is like her worst nightmare. She doesn't even use TikTok, but she moves into this crumbling mansion with all these Gen Z content creators. She has to face the generation coming to replace her. And the mystery of the book is that one of these Gen Z influencers has disappeared from the mansion.
I enjoyed the book a lot. I think when you were on with your poetry collection, I think you had maybe had the idea for this book or started writing it, and you said, or at least the idea back then was it's a gothic novel, but you can't really write a gothic novel in the sense of, Jane Eyre or something anymore because women are allowed to leave the house now. But the idea of a hype house and sort of COVID and other things like spark something in your in your imagination. Is that where this came from?
Yes, you have a good memory. And I had taken a class on Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which was kind of the seed of it. And I think at the beginning, I was also thinking like I would write Jewish Rebecca. Like that's how I was pitching it. It was like Rebecca, but Jewish. But then making in a Gothic novel, you need this kind of Mr. Rochester, Max de Winter, like older, mysterious, brooding hero character who's like hiding secrets from the main character. And I tried writing him Jewish in early drafts. And then I chickened out. This is okay. This is connected to Philip Roth. I don't know if you're a Philip Roth fan, but I've just gotten into.
I am a Philip Roth fan.
I've
Yes.
just gotten it. I'm in my Philip Roth era, and I chickened out because in my household with my husband, we call it bad for the Jews. Like if I was going to make this creepy older rich guy who owns the mansion Jewish, and he's the one you're supposed to suspect of harming the missing influencer, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't make him Jewish. But now that I'm in my Philip Roth era, I'm like, damn, he had so much more, shall we say, chutzpah than I do because he was writing these like immoral, cheating, liar, adulterer Jewish characters, and it outraged the Jewish community. Like rabbis were sending him letters like, how could you do this to us? Bad for the Jews.
Yes, and this was in the 1960s is when he broke out, and so the memory of the Holocaust was live, and yeah, then he turned that whole experience into the fiction itself and the Ghostwriter and other
The
books like that.
Ghostwriter, I'm obsessed with the Ghostwriter.
I know
It's so
it's so
good.
good.
It's so good.
Okay, that's interesting. So the main character is half Jewish.
Yeah, so the main
Um,
character is half Jewish, but the male protagonist is not Jewish. And basically, when I took this class on Rebecca, the teacher said to write a contemporary Gothic today, you need a good reason. The characters are inside the house. What's keeping the woman inside the house? And I remembered this Taylor Lorenz article about a real Los Angeles hype house during the pandemic where these influencers lived together. And then I was like, I put those two things together and came up with the idea of a Gothic TikTok hype house.
and so, what is a hype house for people who maybe don't know what it means?
These are real and they were popular during the pandemic, but they still exist today. There was just an article, I think, in New York Magazine by Rebecca Jennings about one that's in Florida for OnlyFans creators. So basically, it's a mansion where influencers live together. And why would they do this? It's because they can grow their audiences through collaboration. So, like, if you and I were in the same mansion together, like, I would go on your podcast and then you would appear in my TikTok video. Like, I would make you learn a dance. And then people would be like, who's that man dancing in Leigh's video? And they would go follow you. So it helps you grow your audience. And some people from these original hype houses are now obscure and irrelevant. And you don't know who they are. And some of them are Addison Rae, who's now like being positioned as the next Britney Spears. She was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. Alex Warren, who has an incredible I was going to say Cinderella story. He's a man, but like he was like homeless living in his car. And then he joined one of these hype houses and now he has a hit song on the radio. So there are some incredible success stories from these real life hype houses. But mine, of course, is a fictional composite from my imagination.
Right, and so the story is set in 2021. Is that right?
It is. It is.
And
Yeah.
so I think when we first talked about this, I mean, it probably was because your poetry collection came out, which was responding to COVID directly. How did you think about the timeline? Because the pandemic intersects with the plot, but this is not a pandemic novel. Yeah. How did you think about that?
It's so hard. Yeah. So I wrote a book of poetry during the pandemic. I'm sure many other people do that as well. I'm
But,
sure
but
I'm
yours
not
was
the
actually
only one.
published, so
But mine was published. And I just felt like I had to document like the surreality of what was happening around us. So like I have poems about like stuff that was happening on Twitter. Like I was just trying to document the craziness that was happening in 2020 through poetry. And then I started writing this in 2021. It's set in 2021. It's a hard negotiation. The question of how much and whether to include the pandemic in your fiction, because I think readers don't want to read about it. I don't think readers want to go back there. And even in 2020, I remember that a lot of people online, this was surprising to me. Even my own mom was like, "Did you know there was a flu epidemic in the 19 teens?" I was like, "Yeah, we learned about that in school." And she was like, "I must have completely forgotten that." And suddenly there was this conversation about where is all the literature of the flu epidemic? There is very few. There isn't a lot.
right.
It's like people just wanted to move on and forget it. And I feel like a similar thing happened with COVID, where it's like we don't really want to read novels about lockdown. So I wrestled with this, but I also can't write a novel about TikTok without situating it in a certain time, because there's a reason that TikTok became such a popular app among young adults. It's because we told young adults, you can't go to high school, you can't go to prom, you can't go to school, you can't go to college, everything has to be on Zoom. So I have a little bit of a pandemic, a little bit in one of the chapters. There is something that happens during the pandemic to one of the characters. And I just felt like I couldn't, it would feel wrong to me to completely leave it out of the novel if the novel's set in 2021.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I remember 5 years ago, roughly, having a similar thought and reaching out, looking online, reaching out to a woman who wrote an academic nonfiction book about the literature of the Spanish
I remember that.
influenza,
Yes.
and she said she was too busy to do it because probably everyone else is reaching out to her because she was the only one who had like studied the literature this period. But yeah, there's no, there's so many novels about World War I or the aftermath of World War I, but the flu epidemic was, largely forgotten. And but I never had that conversation with that woman, so
Didn't
I don't know
she
exactly why.
didn't I learn from her that the Yeats poem The Second Coming was written as his wife was like very ill with the flu? Like isn't that
Oh,
poem from that
interesting.
era?
That's possible. Yeah, and I think Mrs. Dalloway has a reference, some
Yes.
references to it, but it's yeah. There's no like great, great influenza, great novel that in the way that there's All Quiet on the Western Front or something like that is a
Yeah.
great World War I novel. Yeah, and I and just from a you want people to read your book sense, I think people don't want to think about the pandemic anymore because it sucked.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so the book is about TikTok, this TikTok hype house, but you don't use the word TikTok. You call it the platform. How did you come to that decision?
I kind of stole that choice from Patricia Lockwood, who wrote a Twitter novel called, is it called Nobody's Talking About This? It's on my shelf. Something like Nobody's Talking About This.
Mm-hmm.
I love that novel, but she never calls it Twitter. I think she refers to it as the portal.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so I'm kind of doing a nod to that by calling it the platform. The whole time I'm writing this novel, also, I'm like unsure if TikTok will even exist by the time the novel comes out. Like I started it in 2021 and there have been many bumps along the road about whether we would even have TikTok anymore. And I just think calling it TikTok would almost distract more than calling it the platform. So it's just this ambiguous stand-in for an app that I think most people will recognize when they read it.
Right. Yeah. When I noticed that you weren't using the word, I was thinking, well, it is a stupid word, and it just kind of jumps out on the page because it has two capital T's in it, and just seeing it over and over again would maybe,
You don't want it to look like an ad. You don't want it to look like I'm advertising. Even with self-care, like the platform is called Ritual, and that's kind of like Instagram, but I don't know if I use the word Instagram in self-care.
right.
But everyone knows what it is, what I'm referring to.
Is this, has anyone written a novel about people who are on TikTok or about TikTok before? Is this the first one?
I thought that I would be the first, and then I read Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe, which is a great, funny novel that I highly recommend. And it's about this 19-year-old who gets knocked up by her college English professor and decides to keep the baby, but she can't keep her job at the restaurant where she waitresses because she can't bring her baby to work. And so she decides to create content on OnlyFans to support herself. So she becomes an OnlyFans content creator, and she learns TikTok to promote her OnlyFans account.
Okay.
And I love this novel. I have one critique of this novel, which is that it's set in this ambiguous before the pandemic so time period so that she can avoid having to write about the pandemic. So in her book, TikTok exists pre-pandemic. And that to me is very anachronous because as I said a few minutes ago, like TikTok, I mean, the pandemic was so critical for making TikTok the success that it is today. But I am like, probably the only person in America that noticed that as an anachronism.
Right. I mean, definitely what yeah, it was around, but it wasn't as prevalent and I probably didn't know what it was at that point. Okay, that makes sense. So you have two main point of view characters in this book. How did you and one we mentioned who is the Dana, who is the millennial geriatric millennial who takes over sort of the manager of this hype house, and then the other one is Olivia. Is that her name?
Yeah.
How did you decide that this was how you want to structure it from having like multiple perspectives, and how are you thinking about it? Someone who is somewhat like you versus this woman who's like 18 or 19 years old.
I thought it would be interesting. I mean, the book is partly a mystery and it's partly a satire of intergenerational misunderstanding and intergenerational conflict and just these gaps in understanding. And I was just thinking a lot about aging and thinking even of myself, how when I was young, I would look at middle-aged people and think like, that'll never happen to me. Like, how could they let that happen to their face? You know what I mean? Like, it was like looking at a different species. Like, you didn't think that you were the same as those people. And so confronting that as a middle-aged person and now looking back at Gen Z and just thinking like, there's so much you don't know. And the irony of thinking Gen Z is so ineffective and incompetent at everything, but also we give them so much cultural power. Like we want to know what music they think is cool and what pants they think are cool. So I have this aging 39-year-old who's like looking back on her life and like what choices she made and what she would have done differently and what she's bitter and resentful about. But she can't envy. I mean, then when you see the point of view of Olivia, who's 19, it's like, who could envy what a 19-year-old goes through because they're going through their own turmoil. So each of them can't see the other's point of view. So that was my intention of juxtaposing those two different characters because each of them can't recognize what the other's going through.
Mm-hmm. And how do you approach writing the younger character? Did you talk to the young people, the youth, or where did this come from?
I did. I mean, I did hire a young college grad to be my TikTok research assistant. So I had two of those over the course of writing the book, and they really helped me just use TikTok as a search engine and show me content that I wasn't going to see on my own. They just helped show me things that I wouldn't see. But writing a 19-year-old, I think I was just channeling what I remember of being 19, where I just felt constantly like I was not sure what I was supposed to be doing in any given moment
Mm-hmm.
and just second guessing, like, did I say the wrong thing? Did I do the wrong thing? What are other people thinking about me? There's the self-consciousness of that age and I don't know, you're seeking validation and attention, but you're also like extremely cringe. And I also think I think millennials are much more cynical, jaded, and ironic. And Gen Z to me comes across as much more earnest and their sense of humor is more absurd.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I have been thinking that like it's millennials who are sort of the earnest ones, and we're the cringy ones. And whereas Gen Z is more into this like brain rot, like nonsense, almost like a nihilistic kind of thing. Like they've like the world they grew up in was so much worse than ours with the pandemic and smartphones everywhere and Trump. Whereas millennials were into like there was a whole stupid discourse a couple of weeks ago about like the Avett Brothers and Lumineers and Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros music.
Oh, yes, the stomp clap music.
Yeah, the stomp clap hey music, which I actually still kind of like, but that is sort of like sincere, even though it's like silly, but like they were sincerely clapping and like saying hey and stuff all together. Whereas like okay, so yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I guess I do see your point about the music. I guess maybe I'm talking about the way that these generations create content or perform their identity online. Like I see like millennials love satirical content. Like I have a whole group chat where we share parody videos of the Mel Robbins "Let Them" idea because it's so ridiculous. So like those parody videos are just so funny to us.
Uh-huh.
Something that's like like broad comedy, like really recognizable. versus like Gen Z humor. Like when I see what they find funny, I'm always like, can someone explain this to me? Like it's not immediately legible to me. It is absurd. I think among Gen Z, the Steve Martin Walk Like an Egyptian, like SNL thing went viral with them. It's
Huh.
just like that kind of 70s SNL. You know, they would like that Candygram where the shark knocks on your door. Like that's the kind of thing that they would like.
Okay.
So that's the difference that I see. And I see Gen Z more willing to be like I mean, to research this novel, I watched all these videos of girls crying on camera, like the willingness to cry on camera, whereas I feel like millennials have a more protective armor and would kind of make fun of that.
Okay, interesting. I mean, there's definitely a contrast between the early stage of Instagram where the stereotype was like everything was, you would photograph your meal and it was like symmetrical, everything was plated very nicely, the colors were all nice, and it'd be this one still image just like, oh, look at this perfect meal or perfect latte art or something. Whereas as I understand it, this sort of food stuff that's popular on TikTok is like a giant like hoagie sandwich, and they'll like split in half and hold up to the camera. You see like the oozing, sauce and cheese and stuff, and it's like maximalism and sort of like in your face. So like the preciousness of that like Instagram perfect fake life that like millennials were the
Yes.
pioneers of or something. Like
Yes.
that's totally different.
Yes, it's more chaotic and the bar for getting attention has been raised. So to get attention, you have to do things that are even more extreme. And I think that's why you're seeing maximalist stuff. You also see like crazy food combinations on TikTok, things you would never put together that just keeps your attention, it keeps you watching as you're making this face of disgust. Like what are they doing?
Right. Because a lot of that era of Instagram was sort of like aspirational,
Yes.
being like, look at my perfect life, look at my perfect latte, and sort of a girl boss kind of thing. It's a topic you have written about in the past. Whereas now, yeah, maybe it's more like, well, we know everything sucks. Like we had this pandemic, we have Trump. No one needs to pretend that their food is symmetrical anymore or anything like that.
Yeah, there are like Gen Z influencers in the vein of like the women in self-care. So there are these like beautiful young women who do a lot of working out and drink a lot of smoothies. Like that kind of content still exists. It hasn't
Uh-huh.
gone away. I guess I just don't pay as much attention to it. To me, it seems like derivative. Like it's derivative of an era of millennial content where I'm more interested in, I guess, the more I don't know, the more curious or strange corners of TikTok that like we didn't have on Instagram.
Mhm. So the character who you referred to who is missing, his name is Becca, right?
Yes,
So there's I assume that's some sort of nod to the du Maurier novel.
it is.
So she is a tarot influencer. Can you talk about how you came to that and like what role that plays in the novel?
So for people who aren't on TikTok, the thing to understand about what makes TikTok so powerful and unique is that the algorithm is not sending you content by people you like and follow. It's sending you specific videos based on other specific videos you've liked in the past. So it learns your preferences very closely and then it delivers content that seems like it's made for you. You're like, how does TikTok know that this is what I want to see? And so the tarot card side of TikTok is perfectly matched with this algorithm because the tarot card readers will create these videos where on screen it says, this message was meant to find you. Someone from your past is thinking about you. Someone misses you in heaven. So it's always a message that is broadly applicable to the audience and that stops your scroll and makes you feel like destiny has arrived on your phone. Like this is the message that you're meant to see. And so in the novel, I'm exploring what would happen if one of those kinds of content creators disappeared from the platform after she became famous because her audience would want to solve the mystery of where she'd gone, especially if that audience believed that she was uniquely gifted with delivering the messages that they needed to hear from their loved ones or from the beyond.
So tarot has definitely like grown in popularity over the, I don't know, past decade or so. But this TikTok iteration of it where someone is like drawing tarot cards and it's supposed to be for the viewer, like this is both like fucked up. It doesn't make any sense to me because it's obviously not for you. I mean, it's on your For You page, I guess, but like, you know, a million people are seeing this. And so it can't, I get, so it's maybe more like like the old Zodiac, like
Like reading your horoscope in
yeah,
the
horoscope
newspaper.
thing in the newspaper. But
Yeah.
how does that make any sense. Because if someone okay, if you accept that tarot has some connection to some like real we don't understand or something, if someone is doing tarot directly in front of you, that's like, okay, I could perhaps buy that this is something about me. But if it's someone you don't know doing it and then it goes out to millions of people, like why do people embrace this?
Um, I wonder if we can think about like what the state of someone is in when they're scrolling. Like if they're scrolling on the phone, it might be late at night. I actually have a friend who's of an older generation than I am, and she was texting me as I was writing the book because she said, as she was going through kind of a dramatic situation with a gentleman caller, she was following a lot of these tarot accounts that were delivering her messages about this guy, you know? So she really felt like you're late at night scrolling, you're mad that someone sent you a certain text, and then you see this message that seems like it's just so perfectly aligned with what you're looking for. But I think anyone that's listening to this has had some experience of opening their phone and being shown something and thinking, how do they know that about me? Like, I think you felt that on Instagram, you felt that on Twitter, like people think their phone is listening to them. So we've all had this eerie experience of seeing something that it's like uncanny how our phone knew that we needed to see that, and so that is just amplified, with these tarot readings.
Is this just like yet another example of how everything like is becoming worse and like online stuff is bad and it, like leads into real life badness? I don't know, because if 30 years ago you read your daily horoscope or something, maybe that resonated with you. um yeah, I don't know, but maybe it's just a new iteration of that, but it somehow seems worse and more deranged to me than what we used to have. I don't know.
I mean, my novel is not a Jonathan Haidt book, so it's not like this is why TikTok is bad and like your kids shouldn't be on it. Like actually my dream for the book is just that people could read it. I mean, I would love if Gen X parents of Gen Z kids read the book together and talked about it, because I think the moment that we're in right now is that we have a lot of ambivalence about social media that we aren't even registering, because it's like we know that it's damaging our attention. We know that it's making us angry, yet we can't leave. Like I see these posts on Instagram from women that are like, I'm renegotiating my relationship with this space right now. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to be here, you know? So people are thinking about wanting to leave, but they can't leave. They want to go, but they can't. And I think if we could just talk about how we have this intense ambivalence and mixed feelings about it. Like I'm not on Twitter, but I haven't deactivated my account yet because there's a part of me that's like, I don't know, like, but I built that, or like I have that
Right.
audience, or like what if I want it in the future, but I'm not there. I just have
Yeah.
mixed feelings.
Yeah. So the last time we talked was about 2 years ago. We talked about TikTok, and I was sort of like, I'm scared of TikTok, and you were sort of ambassador of TikTok, and I was joking like. You did not convince me that I should join TikTok at the end of the episode. Not that you were trying to, but I still have not joined TikTok 2 years
Yeah.
later, and I also have quit Twitter, and that was mainly a reaction to Trump's reelection and Musk's role in it. And but I did not delete my account either. I don't know if I'm going to go back, but it is, it is useful still on occasion if you want to message someone,
Yeah.
whose contact information you don't have. But I don't scroll it idly, and I might write a piece about this, but I got on the Blue Sky, which is like the methadone to the heroin of Twitter/X, where it's sort of like serves, it quiets the craving, but it doesn't like get you high. It's
That's
just
good.
sort of
That's a
like
good
dull.
analogy. Yeah.
Um, so that's been my replacement. But yeah, one of the reasons I didn't even want to try TikTok, not even once, was like 2 years ago. I was like, yes, I have an addictive relationship with Twitter, and the thing that's now even like better at getting me hooked to be like, I'm fighting heroin, like I don't want to try fentanyl. And so yeah, okay, well maybe we can. Is there anything else you want to say about the book before maybe we'll talk some more, sort of a little bit more about like internet internet stuff in general?
I think the last thing I'll say about the book that will segue us into the internet is that my book is set in this house based on a real Frank Lloyd Wright mansion in LA called the Ennis House. And I became obsessed with this house while I was writing the book. And I learned that Frank Lloyd Wright has this architectural technique called compression and relief, or compression and release, where he's kind of guiding how you move through his homes by confining you to these narrow hallways and then opening you up into these huge, beautiful rooms with vaulted ceilings so that you feel this sense of relief when you walk in. And so when I learned that, I realized that this becomes a kind of metaphor in the book for what the algorithm is doing. It's kind of funneling the user directly to the content it wants you to see. And I think it kind of funnels the creators, people like me who are creating content. We're funneled to create certain kind of content that it wants us to create, and then it will reward us with validation and likes. And sometimes it will withhold that so that we will produce more content to give us what it wants. And so that to me was the bridge between the physical Gothic mansion architecture and the architecture of the internet.
I like that. That's interesting. I have to think about that some more. I mean, yeah, it does seem, the algorithms or the platforms have sort of trained us to respond in certain ways. And people who do that successfully, like some of them became famous and made a lot of money, but then other people like are trying to do it and didn't, but they're still like behaving this way. And, they're still like holding their sloppy sandwich up to the camera, even if like they're not getting any reward. And maybe they don't want to eat a giant sloppy sandwich. But it's like what has proven to be a winner in the past. So that's all fucked up.
It's like once you take off, like once you become one of these people that does take off, you need to create that same content over and over and over again. You can't deviate. You can't rebrand. You can't pivot, especially on TikTok. Once you found your niche, you have to remain in that lane.
And the characters in the book sort of like they all have their niches, and so that plays out in the book as well. And there's this one guy who is like a hot 19-year-old, and his following is like middle-aged women primarily.
Yes.
And I know that like I was actually talking to someone about the book, and she hadn't heard of this phenomenon. I was like, it's real, like like this
He's
really
based on a
happens.
real guy. I read a profile of a real content creator named William White who went viral for lip syncing Mandy by Barry Manilow and then winking. It's like 7 seconds.
Yeah.
And he has a huge fandom. I've like watched live streams of him talking to them live. They're obsessed with him.
And there's this way that a viewer on TikTok can pay the creator. So it's like these women are like
It's like a tip jar. Yeah, it's like a tip
sending
jar.
money like in tribute or like competing against each other to send the most money to this guy. Okay, so that segues into what I wanted to ask about the internet, which is like, how are you feeling about the internet these days? Because to me, it seems like it's all like it's getting bad, like getting worse every day, and a lot of the fun stuff that I used to like about the internet has been destroyed, or is just like carrying on in this zombie form. Like people are still on Twitter. I quit, but like there's a number of people who were once read their little posts every day. They keep on going. But I don't know if it's just like, where did the fun has all seemingly all gone, and just like everything is like AI somehow enabled or something, and that all seems bad to me and not what I liked being on the computer for 10 or 20 years ago. Do you agree that everything sucks online now?
I don't feel as pessimistic about it because I think I still use the internet the same way I used the internet 20 years ago, which is basically to make friends and like gossip in DMs. Like that has all continued for me. So like the people element still remains. I still make connections with people. I still talk to people all day long online. I'm creating content for people. So that I guess keeps me from becoming a cynic. Also, I enjoy parts of TikTok. I enjoy parts of Substack. I enjoy parts of Instagram. So I enjoy where I'm at. I didn't join Blue Sky. It sounds like a miserable place that I would not enjoy. Like the way you're selling it as methadone. Like I'm not being sold.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like I'm not going to convince you to join TikTok.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it miserable. There definitely are miserable people on there. It is sort of just like a neutral kind of. The way I've experienced it is like a neutral kind of thing that is somewhat like Twitter, but is not as bad as Twitter, but it's definitely not as good as Twitter.
Yeah.
But looking back on all the time I wasted on Twitter, like there were some great days, but it was mostly just a waste of time or me cooking my own brain and a lot of stupidity. So, I don't know.
I wonder if you feel like the thing we've lost when we lost Twitter are like these moments where we were all in on something together. And we just had one of those moments recently with the Coldplay shaming of the affair couple, which I felt very uncomfortable with, but it was a moment where we were all together. And right now what's happening, I haven't made content about it yet, but there is a an exciting moment happening because Jia Tolentino reviewed Elizabeth Gilbert's new memoir.
Oh, yes, I read it. Yeah.
And so people are talking about the New Yorker piece. And to me, I was just thinking like there's something so wholesome about this. It makes me feel like 2017 because it's not cancel culture, right? You have like a heavy hitter of millennial personal essay writing, Jia Tolentino. Then you have like a heavy hitter of Gen X memoir writing. Gia's taking her seriously and evaluating her work. And this just feels to me like, couldn't we have this every day? Like it's so satisfying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Gia, you need to write. You need to be a lot more prolific. But also, no, okay. So this is a great. I'm glad you brought this up. It's a great. We'll include the link. It's a great review of Elizabeth Gilbert's new book. Elizabeth Gilbert, like her life became very strange over the past 10 or so years. I knew nothing about. I never read Eat, Pray, Love. I was just aware of who she was. I never.
But
Yeah,
you
so I
like
didn't know
know
any.
what it is, even if you haven't read it. It
Yeah,
was like
I
such a
mean,
cultural juggernaut. Like
exactly.
you know about
Yeah,
Eat, Pray,
so
Love.
she went into all sorts of strange directions and wrote a new book, and Tolentino both just summarizes it and sort of tears it apart. But okay, so on Blue Sky, I follow the New Yorker account, and one of the things that people who are on Blue Sky like to say is that it drives traffic to articles because people actually click, because Twitter, especially in the Musk era, was like limiting articles that had links, even to links to like specific outlets like the New York Times that Elon Musk didn't like. And so it wanted to like trap you on the platform and not lead you off. And so, 2013 era Twitter, one of the great things is like a link aggregator, and you would find interesting articles and people would talk about them. We're just like, here's sort of the 5 most interesting things of the day. And then I followed the New Yorker account on Blue Sky, and they tweeted out Tolentino's piece. And I clicked on it and read it, and I was like, holy shit, this is nuts. And then I quote tweeted it, and I said, if people on Blue Sky actually clicked on the links like they say they do, like everyone would be going nuts about this article and what Elizabeth Gilbert has been up to lately. And it had like, 2 retweets or something. So there's some disconnect here. I don't know. People don't either. I don't know. They don't want to gossip about Elizabeth Gilbert and Jia Tolentino anymore the way they wanted to in 2018 or something, or just it's not on the platform. People are just doing it in group chats
They're
and
doing
direct
it.
messages
Yes,
or something.
That's it. They're not doing it in public. They're doing it in group chats and DMs. That's what I think it is.
Right. Okay. And that makes sense because if you want to say something mean about Elizabeth Gilbert, then that could possibly and you're, want to be a writer someday or are a writer, that could invite some backlash, and plenty of like real things like that have played out over the years on social media. And you can just be nastier with your friends than you would be in public. So that all makes sense. But it was like, yeah, if something like this had happened in 2017 Twitter, then it would have been a great day of fun.
It would have been.
But like that period has passed. But also like it would have been a great day of fun. But like, so is like doing cocaine. What were we actually doing, and who are
But
we
we're
serving
nerds.
with this?
I mean, this is fun for nerds. It's like a new Jia Tolentino piece that we can all talk about. Like this is recreation for nerds. There were 2 things that I found so interesting about this. One is there's a part in the review where Jia Tolentino says that Elizabeth Gilbert's newest book reads more like Elizabeth Gilbert's Substack than her previous books, that there's like a lot of white space on the page and then like a one-liner that's like pseudo profound. And I thought this is so interesting because it's showing what I see as the difference between content and writing. Because I see my Substack as my content. I write that very quickly, and there's inevitably a typo in what I publish, and no one edits me. And I'm just trying to share a lesson or teach something, versus my novel, which took me 3.5 years to write and has been revised multiple times and professionally edited and professional copy edited and professionally proofread. So for Elizabeth Gilbert to like, it's almost like, can content destroy your brain so that you forget how to write? Because Gia says some very flattering things about like the strength of her prose and like early positive reviews of her work. And she started as a novelist and a magazine writer. She like wrote for Esquire. Like she's a real writer, capital
Yeah.
W. But it's like, has producing content like warped her writing brain so that she thinks in Substacks now?
That's interesting. And probably Substack is sort of like the least bad or possibly even good of the like social media platforms that are still
Because you can go
extant.
long.
Right. And it's less exploitative, and it's not like total garbage in the way a lot of other social media is. I've also been thinking like for so long, a decade plus, if I had someone on this podcast and at the end they say like, oh, where should people look for content? They'd say their Twitter handle. And that made total sense. But like, what were we doing, and like, who were we helping? we were sending traffic to Twitter, which was a like unprofitable, like insanely designed sort of accidental website. And we were like directing people to engage with Twitter, which, ended up both like electing Donald Trump the first time and then, leading like Elon Musk to gain power and dismantle the US AID and like all sorts of other bad things. And like what was like the good part was like we had a lot of fun and we joked around and I met friends and people I met in real life, including but you in real life. But yeah, it was like who were we serving in the end? This corporation that was taken over by the richest man on earth, who is like a quasi fascist or anti-Semite, and it's just total garbage now.
A water cooler for media people, and it was like a way to gain access. Like if you didn't have the institutional credentials, right? You didn't go to, like in my world, in creative writing world, you needed an MFA, right, to get published. That was one track to getting a book published. And I came in through the back door. I came in through the internet. So Twitter was like a way to network with people that you weren't going to meet at a professional conference or through an academic, master's program. So I think in that way, it really did do a good service for writers and media workers who came from less traditional backgrounds, in my opinion.
Right. That makes sense. And there were people who bubbled up through Twitter who did not have any, were just like good writers, entertaining, and some people like turned that into careers. So that's good. But
it was also a place where academics could reach a wider audience. Like at the end of my time there, like Tyler Austin Harper, did I get his name right? Like he's an academic, but he started writing for a popular audience, and I found out about him because of Twitter. Like I thought his stuff was really interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, there was this period where like the 5 most interesting articles of the day would get circulated, and you would get everyone would offer their take, but you were directed to maybe a website you hadn't seen before or something. So, but all that sort of curdled in the Musk era. But I don't know. Maybe I'm a bitter geriatric millennial who's nostalgic for the blogosphere, which had its downsides, but was much less toxic and elevated a number of people who, since who became major figures in the media, but also like didn't like bring us Trump and quasi-authoritarianism in America. So so I don't know. So like when I would say like to someone, where can people find your stuff? Most of these people, if they're writers, something, they have a personal website and it's maybe their like first name, last name.com, but like, that would not be updated. It wouldn't be their latest thoughts on whatever. But like, I don't know. It's just like we took this strange turn where we were all like, the Twitter account didn't belong to me. Like it's like twitter.com/REACW. Like it's Twitter's. And because Twitter was a poorly run company and never seemed to know what it was doing, it sort of seemed like this was like a neutral platform like Wikipedia or something, or just like the web. Like but it was a company, and Elon Musk bought the company and used the power that granted him to help get Trump reelected, and that's all bad. So, so I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, and it just seems like there's not maybe because I'm not on TikTok, I'm not seeing the fun and interesting stuff that's happening there. But like, now it seems like a lot of content is made by AI to be consumed by AI, and it's just like, what is it? And someone is like making 1 penny per view, and like.
But where are you? I don't see AI. I guess I see some AI content on Instagram, like artists that use AI to make these like interesting animated art pieces using AI. Where do you see AI on a regular basis?
So I will say I'm mainly seeing the secondhand when people are like aggregating it. So there's all these Facebook pages that are essentially, it's usually people in like India or Nigeria or something, are creating like strange images. Like the shrimp Jesus is the one that got the most attention. It appeared to be like a Jesus on the cross made up of shrimp, and so some person like put that into one of the AI image generators, and then it baffled lots of people. So but some of them are quite disturbing, and it's like images of like babies that have injuries or something, and it's it has that weird sheen that AI images have, where it's like if you look at it closely, you see like this is fake.
Yeah.
But the things get a lot of comments, mostly from older people who are like, "Oh, this is awful. Oh, that poor baby." Or it's just like slop is the term that people have applied to this stuff. And so like there's incentives to, because Facebook gives you 1/10 of a penny for every view you get. There's incentives to create this stuff, especially people who live in the developing world where making like $10 a day or something is worth the effort. And then it's confusing a number of people who don't understand what's going on. But maybe it's a lot of the people viewing this are just like bots themselves trying to
Right.
manipulate the algorithm to get more hits and stuff. And so yeah, so like almost everything involving AI and the traditional internet seems bad to me and like anti-human and against
Yeah.
the fun, like, meeting people and seeing the the jokes and their thoughts that was once like the point of spending time online. Like now it's just robots. So
It
the
is bleak.
robots
I
seem to be
guess,
taking
yeah,
over.
I guess I don't see that. Did you read the novel Wellness by Nathan Hill?
I did not.
I think you would like it. It's really very good. I really like him a lot. He's like a satirist, but he's a very humane writer. But there's a whole section in Wellness that's basically following like a boomer dad as he goes from not really being a computer user at all to being like completely enmeshed in like a QAnon-esque like Facebook thing. But it's just like the progression of what he's seeing and what he believes. It's just done really well. It's a very moving part of that book. So yeah, I guess I do I guess I do worry about my elders being scammed or manipulated. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm just not exposed to enough of it to be concerned about it. I remember like just a few years ago when we were told NFTs were going to change the future of art, and Reese Witherspoon was offering an NFT, and I tried to get a press pass to a New York Times NFT conference, like in person. I tried to get a press pass so I could go cover it. I couldn't even get on the list. And then like the next year they were asking me to come cover, and I was like, no, this isn't a thing. Like you guys told us
Right.
this was a thing, and it's not a thing. So I think I'm not as like alarmist. I'm not as afraid because we've been here before where I was told this would change everything. Crypto's
Okay.
going to change it. The blockchain's
Yeah.
going to change everything.
Right. And obviously, and it seems the whole NFT thing seems stupid at the time, and in retrospect seems like absurd. But the thing that seems to, in my mind, link crypto and AI is that like most of the uses seem against like the good of humanity slash like just using it for some sort of scam. So like the most of the uses that people found for crypto are like scamming other people or using it as like a money laundering tool as part of organized crime. And with AI, a lot of the uses, yeah, similar seem to be like fooling people, teenagers cheating on their high school essays, far out creepy stuff where like you imitate someone's voice and pretend that like they've been kidnapped or something.
That one
And
scares me. That one does scare me.
yeah, so
Imagining my parents getting a phone call and it sounds like me because they could take my voice from podcasts. They could take my voice.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I have hours. Yeah, so if so, if someone wanted to fake my kidnapping, there's plenty of content out there for the AI algorithms to scoop up. So it just seems like all of this is like bad actors are are the only people who are getting any use out of it, and like who is actually benefiting, like these giant corporations or the chip manufacturers or something, or people are already extremely rich. I don't know. It seems it all seems like like things are bad in online world.
So why do you think you remain on the internet? Why do you log into Blue Sky every day?
Well, I think a lot of it is habit. Um, but I've definitely, I got off Facebook entirely 4 or 5 years ago, off Twitter. I do use Instagram, but I try to keep it, I mainly follow people I know in real life or cute animal accounts. But I definitely feel less, and maybe because I'm not on TikTok, I feel less like I'm seeing something new and exciting or
Yeah.
funny in a new way. A lot of it is just like, here's the same old sort of stuff, or here's just a way to spend money or something like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
probably a lot of it is habit.
I think I use Instagram the way people use Facebook. Like I use Instagram to like stay in touch with people and be like, that's so cute or congratulations. It's just like keeping up with people's milestones.
Mhm.
And TikTok is really where I find out what people are talking. I guess TikTok is what Twitter used to be, where I find out what quote unquote everybody, meaning everybody of a certain age in a certain demographic, is talking about. And I find out about books. I find out about book discourse on TikTok.
It has, since the last time we talked, has TikTok changed anyway, especially with, there was this legislation that came close to banning it, but then Trump has been kicking the can down the road, or is TikTok?
As far as I know, Trump just is breaking the law. Like TikTok should not be operational in the United States, and it is. I did think it was absurd. I heard at one point that there's a billionaire named Frank McCourt, not the novel, not the memoirist, but a different Frank McCourt in California, who was one of the bidders who wanted to buy TikTok without the algorithm so that it could operate in the United States legally. And he had never used TikTok before. And I thought this was absurd because how could you buy something and be so sure that it'll work without its algorithm if you've never used it? Because in fact, the algorithm is what makes TikTok special.
Huh. Has your experience on the platform changed at all in the past 2 years?
I think the book talk community has changed. There is a higher rate of burnout on TikTok than any other platform I've ever been on. So like I got on there in 2022. I made friends with all these book talkers. I created, I created a spreadsheet of all these content creators. I was sending them my book. I was keeping in touch with them. And then when I went through that document to send copies of this new book, so 3 years later, the big moment I've been waiting for to send out my book, I mean, half of them were like gone.
Huh.
So there's just a churn. It is just like churning through because the platform demands such a high level of production. It's like a factory. It's like an unregulated factory. So it really burns through. At one point, my book was going to be called Content Factory. And my husband was like, but it sounds like Content Factory. And I was like, that's the joke. He's like, it doesn't work. I'm like, okay. So,
Okay. I mean, I think that sounds more like a book that like Ezra Klein or something would write, like a nonfiction book about like a TED Talk kind of book.
well, I was thinking about like the jungle. Like I was like, am I like a muckraker on TikTok? But it ended up not being that kind of book. It's not really about like, it is about labor, but not in a very, I don't think like moralistic,
Uh-huh.
Goldie way.
Okay, that's funny because that makes me think, I guess Upton Sinclair really did bring the news that like shoes and body parts were falling into the meat grinder and stuff. But like at this point, we all sort of know that like bad things are happening behind the scenes at all these YouTube and like all these content creators, and then people have breakdowns and or they stage a stunt that like cripples one of their friends. Like we don't need Upton Sinclair like to tell us
Well, and
how
there's all
bad
these
things are getting.
the documentaries about family vloggers, family influencers, these parents that use their children to make content and the ethics of that. We're still having that conversation. I mean, that isn't decided or over. And some states are trying to pass legislation to protect child influencers in the way that child actors are protected. Like that, some of that income is supposed to be set aside
Right.
in California for the children for when they're older. But I guess one of the things I've been talking about on my book tour is like until we see content creation as labor, we won't be able to protect the children who do it. Like if we think, oh, this is just like they're just playing for 12 hours on camera. You know what I mean? If we don't see that as work. So I do wish we would recognize that these professional content creators, like this is a job. And I think this is why so many of them burn out on TikTok. It's like these are people that have full-time day jobs and then that are making this content. That's a really hard production calendar schedule to keep up with.
Yeah, and I saw someone say recently, perhaps on Blue Sky, that like the people who in the Substack world who sort of rose to the top were not necessarily the most talented writers, but they were sort of like the canniest business people who sort of understood. And so that's not, hey, I don't know, like 100 years ago, or some ideal would be like you have the artist is creating, and then they like hand it off to the publishers, and they understand the business aspect of things, and they'll make the money add up and stuff like that.
But Jia Tolentino is the perfect example of this because she learned to blog on Jezebel. That's where she learned to write. She was writing thousands of words. She was producing at this very fast rate on Jezebel. She got on the map after the UVA fake rape story broke in Rolling Stone, and she had been a student at UVA, and so she wrote an interesting angle on that, and that's what kind of put her on the map. But when writers today complain to me, it's like they don't have the time for this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, the people that are fast and that do have the time are going to win. Like it is a competitive industry. And if we can just acknowledge that, then you can think about what's your competitive advantage. But writers really don't want to think of it as a competition because they've been told it's not a competition, it's a community. But it's the attention economy. Like on Substack, the writers that produce the most interesting pieces at the highest volume are going to get more attention than someone who blogs once every 6 months.
Yeah. And
look at Freddie DeBoer. I mean, he is like, I mean, I think he said he has graphomania, right? Like he writes at such a volume that it's not normal.
Yeah, and I think Freddie and Metaglacius is another type who can
Yes,
just churn out
I don't know how they do
content at
that.
an incredible pace, and so that's most people can't do that, but also like I don't know, like a constant churn from one person who becomes, for some, 50,000 people, becomes like the omni expert about everything and has a take about everything. Like, that's not great either. So, okay, I noticed in your bio in the book, it says Leigh Stein makes fun of what the internet is doing to us. Um, what do you think? Yeah, how are you feeling about that these days?
Oh man, I think it's true of all my books that some readers are like, that's so funny that you're making fun of those people I don't like. And it's like, yeah, but I'm making fun of you. Like I think I'm an equal opportunity satirist. I'm making fun of everyone. I'm not only making fun of the influencers, I'm making fun of the people who would spend their times in subreddits dedicated to making fun of those influencers. You know what I mean? Like, even if you hate someone, if you make your hatred into a fandom and you're spending time recreationally judging the life of someone on the internet, like, what, like, look at yourself as well. So
Right.
I think my favorite comment to get is when someone says that my book made them uncomfortable, because then I'm like, oh, you got it. You know, I'm trying to implicate everyone in this. I wish we would all look at ourselves. Um, so yeah, I'm making fun of how the internet is is making us believe that we're in relationships with people we don't actually know. That we're entitled. I think I might have told this on Megan Dom's podcast, so I'm sorry for repeating this, but I had this revelation when the new Joan Didion book came out, which was her letters that she wrote to her husband, John, while she was in therapy talking about her daughter's alcoholism. And this was discovered like in her papers that were
Mhm.
donated to the New York Public Library. And when I first saw that that was being published, I felt like, what a violation of her privacy. She never intended for this to be a book. And then my second thought was like, I'm pre-ordering it right now. Like, I have to read. And I felt so entitled, like, well, I'm a Joan Didion fan, so I'm entitled to read this. Of course. Of course I read it cover to cover. But that made me realize that made me understand at a deeper level the entitlement that fans feel to like knowing things about their favorite influencer, their favorite content creator. Like, what are you hiding? What aren't you showing us? You said this, but you weren't really saying that. It's very scary to observe and then to notice it in myself. Scary.
Right. And with Joan Didion, it's like, one of the great writers of the 20th century. You would hope all of her papers were preserved for future study, and and maybe it is somewhat uncomfortable to think that what could have been, it's like a quasi-private diary, is being published a couple years after her death. But like, that all sort of makes sense. Whereas like, it's people becoming obsessed with random content creators, normal people, quasi-normal, not great figures from the 20th century. Yeah, and the way one of the stylistic things you do in the book is that there's a different font, like a sans serif font for the like texting, but also like the messages that people, like comments people are putting on posts and stuff. And the way that's styled is interesting. And then you have sort of a running joke that people never spell you are the correct way. And that made me laugh. Okay, maybe we should wrap things up here. Is there anything else you wanna mention?
Um, I think if anyone's wondering what my second point was about Jia Tolentino, I had one other point to make about Elizabeth Gilbert, which is that Jia Tolentino is critiquing her book. As Elizabeth Gilbert is like a serial memoirist. She's written a memoir and then a memoir and then a memoir. And every time she has these like self-revelation aha moments about how she should really live, because that's the expectation we expect from the memoir. And I just want to point out, she was supposed to publish a novel set in Russia, if you remember.
Right.
And it was review bombed on Goodreads to say that it was damaging to Ukrainians to publish a novel set in Siberia about a family that went into hiding to like escape from the Russian regime. Like, this is a very like anti-Russia novel that happens to be set in Siberia, and she caved to pressure. And so I just think it's such an interesting moment that like her memoir is getting all this scrutiny, but we could have had an Elizabeth Gilbert novel. Like, she actually is a novelist. So she can't win, this woman. I just
Well, yeah, and who can win? Because Tolentino herself was, the target of a bizarre sort of story related to her parents, and people drove her off of social media.
That's right.
And so it's like someone is beloved, and then they, go on for a beat too long, and then everyone turns on them. There's something human about that, but like the internet hypercharges it or something.
But this
And
is all related. Like, whether you are a writer, a memoirist, or a content creator, it's like once you're in the public eye, the public feels like you belong to us now. and we're going to decide whether we're going to put you on a pedestal or tear you down. And
Mhm.
look at Lena Dunham. This is all going to be cyclical. It's just cyclical for women. It happens over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And there was this period over the past couple of years where there's been a reassessment of figures like, Britney Spears and
Yes.
other usually women who the public tore down and the media tore down. But yeah, seemingly the cycle we haven't broken the cycle. But yeah, the idea I guess there's just some deeply human thing about wanting, elevating people and then tearing them back down. And it's often fun to participate in that sort of thing, especially anonymously online or just watch it all happen. I don't know. It just seems like but this is a overbroad statement, but like the internet and the like monetization of it and the attention economy sort of like hypercharges and brings out like bad human instincts instead of like rewarding pro-social or good human instincts.
Yeah, that's
And
probably true.
and it used to be you could like make friends on Twitter and maybe they become in real life friends or something. And like I don't probably no one is making friends on Twitter anymore these days or on Blue Sky either. It's just like we're just like adding to the giant system that helps like rich people and doesn't really help anyone else. Yeah, so maybe I become like a techno pessimist or something in my dotage. But this is a podcast that is part of an algorithm, and people can rate and review and tell their friends and stuff like that. Okay, Leigh Stein, where can people find your stuff?
Um, your listeners are probably not on TikTok, so you can probably find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Leigh Stein, and I'm on Substack. I write a newsletter for writers called Attention Economy on Substack.
Well, thank you for coming on. Congratulations on the book. The title, again, is If You're Seeing This, It's Meant for You. It should be available wherever fine books are sold. And thanks for talking to me about the book and the internet.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.